Welcome. Thank you, St. Lucia, for joining us for yet another episode of What's Happening Now with Laura. This is the platform where we make your stories our stories. The month of October. What is the first thought that comes to your mind when you think of October? Generally, we think of culture. October is generally reserved for or referred to as the month of culture. But what exactly is culture? Well, like I like to say to my kids, I've been to school a number of years, and in all of the years that I've been to school, particularly my secondary school years, a number of themes were found to interchange in the various subjects. So, for instance, in history and in social studies, we studied a little bit about culture, and later on, when I went to A-level college, I did sociology, and we did a little bit of culture there. Typically, culture is referred to the arts and other manifestations of human intellectual achievement regarded collectively. The arts, the humanities, intellectual achievement, literature, music, painting, philosophy, the performing arts. But for me, my favorite definition of culture is the way of life of a people. So culture is a total way of life of a people. Individuals growing up in a culture learn acceptable ways to behave and function in their culture. But what sticks out for you in your culture, in our St. Lucian culture? A lot of the times we think about the food, the eats, the music. This week, I had many reasons to ponder on our culture. What is our culture? What do we embrace as our culture? There's so many things. When they occur, people say, oh, it's nothing. It's our culture. This week, I came face to face with yet another case of child brutality. I'm sure most of you know what I'm talking about. The video has been made viral, circulating on most social media platforms, of an older girl whipping and tossing about like a rag doll a younger girl. A lot of the times we see those videos where a mother is brutally beating her daughter or her son. Well, most times it's the daughters. We hardly see the sons getting brutalized like that. Brutalizing mercilessly a girl child. And when some of us complain, like myself, we say, oh, it's the culture. So much licks I get when I was a child. It never did me any bad. I wasn't worse for the wear. I grew up to be a normal person, well-functioning individual in society. But are we really well-functioning members of society when we can see the senseless and merciless brutalization of a child and cast a blind eye? Can we say that we are well-functioning members of society when we can see this kind of physical abuse going on, make a video, but make no attempt to actually stop the act from happening? Let's take a look at the video in question.
Oh my God!
Hey, tell her to stop that.
Stop! I want to see that.
Baby.
Why is she doing that child act?
So in this video, we can hear the commenting. Why is she doing the child act? But why she's beating the child so? And there are other videos where we can hear persons asking the young woman in question, why is she brutalizing the child like that? And she tosses out comments like she's my sister, or something like she threw my child, or something of the sort. But never did we hear from the many passengers on the bus, driver, stop, let us stop this madness from happening. Not once. And I don't totally blame the persons making the video or the persons viewing this brutalization of this young child and not doing anything, because it is the norm. It has become acceptable behavior in our society. So therefore, is that our culture? The way of life of a people. Is that our culture? Acceptable ways to behave and function. Also this weekend, there was another video circulating of a young man being apprehended by the police and hurling expletives and verbal abuses at the police. And nobody tries to stop or try to encourage the young man from resisting his arrest for whatever the reason is. But we can hear those persons who were around joining in the fray and issuing their own expletives and their own abuses. Let's take a look.
Yeah, video everything, man.
Morning, sir.
Morning.
I report of insulting with the intel
I
officer.
never insult nobody. I have.
We arresting
Stop me, relax.
We arresting you.
Relax. I told you I'd be arresting you. Relax yourself. You gonna bust my pants. Relax. Show us the warrant. Wait, you see? Show the warrant. Show me the warrant. Show us the warrant. So why did you just gonna arrest the man? Why did you just gonna arrest the man? Why did you just gonna arrest the man? The fuck? Excitement, we say ni excitement.
So, is that our culture? That when our police officers charged with protecting and serving our societies when they're executing their jobs? Is that our culture to resist? Is it our culture to prevent them from executing their duties? Is it our culture to stand in the way of them doing their jobs? And when they're called and they don't turn up, to hurl even more abuse at them because they didn't show up. What exactly do we want? Now, there are a number of things that I find wrong with this video. That if I were a police officer in this situation, would disturb me to a great extent. The way the officers were holding their firearms, the way they approached the young men, the way the young men converged on the officers in a very threatening manner. I would be very concerned as a police officer in this situation, you know. And over the course of preparing for this show, I viewed a number of cop shows, and one thing was very clear in all of their arrests. All officers on the scene were not directly involved in apprehending the culprit. There would be some officers directly involved in putting on that handcuff, and others in a stance to protect the other officers who are now unarmed and very vulnerable at that point. Not once did I see any officer covering the officers who were apprehending the suspect in this case. Not one officer took a position, a defensive position, in the event anything untoward were to happen. And I'm very concerned about that. But more concerning for me is the way the citizens in this society were all converging on the officers. I'm not privy to what the circumstance was. Although I understand it had to do something with a bike, a stolen bike or whatnot. But I was very concerned with the behavior, the posture of these young men. Is it any wonder our young men get a bad rap? Is it any wonder when certain factions of our society, when they run afoul of the law, the rest of us say, hands up, not my business, and they do not get the Bo treatment? You know, let's be like Botham Jean in this case. And speaking of Botham Jean, I was listening to a talk show and I heard the host talking about some citizens, expats who were thinking or making the suggestion that Bo should be conveyed upon hero status. And I must say, I was shocked, because although last week I did say that I support the Justice for Bo movement, and I do support every single citizen, whether residing in St. Lucia or outside of St. Lucia. I support your cause. I support you wanting justice for the son of soil in St. Lucia. I support you supporting his family. But let us be realistic. So many others have gone before Bo and did not get that treatment. Why? And not just young men who have run afoul of the law, but so many other citizens far more worthy of hero status have gone unmentioned. Why? What makes Botham Jean so special? And let me just, in case there are anybody who will misconstrue what I'm saying, I would be the very first person on the front line were Botham Jean my brother, or were my brother to have found himself in Botham Jean's situation. I would not be resting until justice was had for my brother. Absolutely not. I would not be resting. So I do sympathize with the family. And it hurts my heart that a family, any family, had to send their son away for studies, and he so decided to set roots in this foreign land and to come back home in a casket. Not because of anything he had done, but because those who were charged with protecting and serving were negligent, were reckless, and took his life. I am incensed at that. Just as I was incensed at Abner Luama's situation all those years ago. Remember I spoke about him last week, the Haitian young man transplanted to New York City who was so brutalized by the New York City police that his rectum and his intestines were ripped because of the sodomy that was inflicted upon him by police officers employed within the police, the New York City Police Department. And I also talked about how he challenged the city of New York, the police department, and the police welfare department, and won upwards of $8 million. This is what I want us to take out of this. But for us now to say that Botham Jean deserves to become a hero, maybe we do not yet understand what a hero is. A hero is a person who is admired for great or brave acts of fine qualities, something they have fear of, but are brave enough to still do something. Bravery being the biggest trait of a hero. This person has usually overcome huge obstacles to survive or to rescue others. Sad to say, Botham may have been a hero if he had lived. But in this case, Botham was ensconced in his living room and shot to death, dare I say murdered, by Amber Guyger. He didn't overcome a fear. It wasn't an act of bravery. He wasn't trying to rescue somebody. He was just minding his own business in his own home when he was murdered by Amber Guyger. And maybe we can empathize and we can sympathize with the family. But that is a far cry from a hero. To me, a hero is Mary Ratcliffe. Remember her? She literally lost her head to preserve that of her daughter. To me, a hero is Kenneth John. He gave his last breath to save a visitor some 20 years ago. July 1st was 20 years since his demise, since he gave his last breath to save that visitor at Grand Anse. To me, a hero is SPC 4 Calvin Stanley Louis, who died 4 years ago while attempting to save the lives of at least 4 individuals during the Christmas Eve trough of 2014. These are heroes to me. And by the definition of hero, they are heroes by any standard. We have never conveyed hero status on them. Why do we like to just take things and just bandy it around just because we're feeling emotional? Why don't we take our emotions and direct them in the direction that is fitting of it? And as I said, that's not to take away from who Botham Jean was. But just can you imagine SPC Calvin Stanley Louise children, how they must be feeling knowing that their father gave up his life, gave up being with them today to save others, and was never conveyed hero status. Let us try to be realistic. This has become a part of our culture, you know? We just take things and just take everything and just throw them on things and just say, okay, yes, that sounds good. You know? He fit the mold. He was a good boy. He sang gospel. He was a good student. He was a good employee, model citizen. And so let us convey these titles. Not just Botham Jean, but there have been others that we want to venerate. People that we've given some of the highest standards, the highest accolades of our country. And they've done stupid things. They've made mistakes. They've done things that ought not to be rewarded. You know? And we give them the highest honors because they are Mr. So-and-so. And others are left in the dust. In the dust. Like so much as a speck of dust under our feet. You know? Is this what our culture is? Is this what we have come to accept as a way of life of our people? A way to behave and function in our society? We're due for a break. When we come back, my guest on culture. Stay tuned.
What happens now?
Welcome back, and thank you for staying tuned to What's Happening Now with Laura, where we make your stories our story. Tonight with me is Mr. Hilary LaForce, and it's all about culture. As I said earlier at the top of the show, my favorite definition of culture is the way of life of a people. You know, a culture is a total way of life. Individuals growing up in a culture learn to accept ways to behave and function. Good evening, Mr. LaForce.
Good evening, Laura.
And how are you?
Oh, pretty good thus far.
Great. What do you think of the definition I gave of culture earlier? The way of life of a people, the arts, manifestations of human intellectual achievement, the humanities, literature, music. What is your take on culture?
Well, you're actually correct. Culture is a way of life of a people. But I want to say the civilized way of life of a people. And it's the learned way of doing things. Mm-hmm. Children learn things from their parents, and it's a way of life. It's a way that they brought up. The language, the mode of dress, the food, the way that you express yourself, the way you walk, the way you run, all of this is part of your way of life, of your culture. But it's important that we stress on the aspects of being civilized, being law-abiding.
Let's expound on that. Mm-hmm. At the top of the show, in the preamble, I would have talked about a number of situations which have become norm and have been perpetuated from time immemorial. Mm-hmm. So the abuse of children in the name of discipline, mm-hmm. this has been with us for years, for decades. Mm-hmm. The way we behave and interact towards the police. Mm-hmm. This has been with us for years. Certain enclaves just don't trust the police. Mm-hmm. That is their culture. Mm-hmm. So explain to us when you say civilized, because to me, these are all civilized societies that perpetuate or present that kind of behavior. So when you say civilized, what exactly do you mean?
Civilized, in other words, that we don't operate like cave people or like animals. Mm-hmm. We deal with people in a godly manner. Okay, ensuring that we are all equal as human beings and we would attempt not to hurt people. However, deviant behavior is also part of life. And you mentioned sociologists, you did sociology. So the sociologists will say to you that deviant behavior keeps society in check. All right, so once there are persons, if people don't do bad things, something is wrong. Society won't function properly. Now, that was the way God wanted it. But recall that deviant behavior began with Adam and Eve. They actually didn't do what God wanted them to do. And so it continued. All right? So, and hence the reason why there's punishment. And you talk about abuse. Of course, in the early days, we didn't call it abuse. We called it corporal punishment, which was accepted in the society. Today, that has changed. At one time, it was a regular thing in schools. If you did something out of the way, you're punished. Okay, today we may say that it was abuse, but for us in those days, it is part of our culture.
Yes, just like enslavement was a cultural,
Exactly.
a cultural thing, but we do know that even then it was wrong, even though it was acceptable.
Yes, but one would say that in corporal punishment also provided a way of keeping people in check, that you do the right things, that you don't break the law.
Yeah, but it's
Okay.
breaking your spirit as well.
Granted, one could then argue that in the days when they had corporal punishment, persons were they obeyed the law.
Did they obey the law more, or is it that we
Well-
now have more people in society? We have a larger population, and so with a larger population, you would find more occurrences of deviant behavior as opposed to back then, and more deviant behavior is out in the open, and you have various ways of manifestations of deviant behavior as opposed to back then where you probably fisticuffs. That was what we had,
Well,
you know, and the
an
occasional
example.
knife fighting.
An example, a while ago you showed that video of this police trying to apprehend this gentleman, and the other persons resisting and so on. In the very early days, even in the colonial days, you wouldn't see that happening. The police, they didn't have guns, but they have the baton, and they beat you up for trying to resist arrest, and nobody would say anything. So it kept people in check.
Is
Okay.
it that it kept people in check, or that people just resisted less?
I wouldn't say they resisted. They know very well that if they didn't obey, they would be punished.
Yes,
and,
but they
punished severely.
punishment still
Corporal
exists.
punishment. Okay.
Punishment still exists today, but
Still, yes.
you still find people are resisting a lot more now than they did back then. Is it that we were so coward, and we were so not coward as in I'm just afraid of everything, but coward, like, you know, cowed into submission, you know?
I think 2 years ago we had more God-fearing people who used this as the way of looking at things. We had to obey God. We had to obey the law. And so there's less resistance. Today, it's gone haywire. Persons are not God-fearing anymore.
What do you attribute to that, though?
Quite a lot. The fact that persons, this homogeneity among many societies has gone completely. Years ago we had, and this is one of the things that we promote as a FRC, what they call the Kudme spirit. Persons assisted others who were in the same social strata to assist in building homes. A key area was when someone died, they didn't spend a cent. Today you got an undertaker, you got to spend most of that money. In those days, if somebody dies, persons come up with the boards and they make the coffin, they bring in food, they dig the tomb, and the people who are grieving pays nothing. Today, things have changed, okay? Today, there was this camaraderie. Persons go to people's home and they have discussions on all different topics. Today, this person is home watching the television or the computer. You dare not come around anymore. So that aspect of camaraderie and being friendly to others, this is actually going, and it's because of things are changing. Technology has changed, and so it has created that almost a monster where people don't interact with people anymore, unfortunately.
But more and more in our education system, we're hearing, let's branch out of traditional education. Let's bring in computers. Let's do away with books. Let's not read books anymore. Let's use the computer. Let's do everything electronically, do you think that that perpetuates that phenomenon that you just described?
It would appear so. Because today, for example, you see many youngsters with a cell phone. A very important tool. It's very innovative. They hardly speak to each other. Everyone is on their cell phone. There are times they're in the same room and they text each other on that very phone. That's how the aspect of interaction has gone almost completely. And so people begin to live in their own way, live, you know, the individualness has begun to show up. Persons are more materialistic. You know, you can't come to my house anymore. For example, you recall in the early days of when we had Christmas, persons went house to house. This is all gone. What are you coming to do with my house? I don't need you. You know, I've got my stuff, or what I need, I have that stuff. I've got my games, I've got my video. There's no need to come. So that aspect of our culture is basically gone. Although, of course, people will say to you, and it's true, that culture is dynamic. It will change as time goes on. What has been done today will not happen in the next few years from now. So, but these technologies seem to have had a toll on our togetherness, that camaraderie, that God-fearing, that persons coming together, congregating. That is the aspect of it. And I will get to that a little while when we talk about our Junior Koyol and what's been happening, where people criticize and say, oh boy, it's a big bloco. People get together. But what's a bloco? People come together. Okay, they speak, they discuss. Okay, maybe over some alcohol, not excessive, but they're coming together. And this is what you need people to do that. Not to stay around and criticize each other, but come together. So
before we go to that, I'm glad that you brought that up, but we'll come back to that in a little bit. You said earlier that culture is dynamic.
Very well.
Culture is dynamic, it changes. So the Kudme, you explain the Kudme aspect of it. You explain, like, for instance, the house to house, the Sewinal, and all of those things are a thing of the past. But yet we still refer to it as culture. Is it really culture if we no longer do it as an everyday normal part of our lives, as the definition described? It's learned acceptable behavior and functions of a society.
Yeah.
It's a way of life.
Exactly.
It's no longer our way of life. Can we still call it culture if it's no longer our way of life?
Well, it is disappearing, and it is still part of our culture because there's still some persons in society who continue with this aspect of their lives. Some of our farmers, for example, they get together and work. They have something called June Equity. You come to my place and you work for me today. Next day, I go to your place and work. All right, it's a way of doing this. There's also the Susu and the Beja. That still continues. So it's a way of persons coming together to ensure that within the real society, they get things going. The aspect of Kudme is not widespread, but it still continues. Years ago, when people had no cash to exchange, persons barter. They exchange food for fish. And exchange, I recall my grandmom saying to me that they walked from Kabish down to Rapin Poisson, bought breadfruit, take the breadfruit, go to grocery, and exchange for fish. Okay, people had no money, but that's a way of life. It's a way of and persons enjoyed the whole thing. Now, persons wasn't concerned about walking. They walked distances. The persons who left Barbuda walked all the way to VA4 to sell farine for the Americans. These are the Americans, and it was no big thing. Okay, so that aspect of our lives is, of course, things are modernized. There's vehicles. Today, you tell the child to walk to grocery. Are you crazy? That does not sound right at all. Okay, but as I said, culture is dynamic. It changes.
So I hear you, and I can see it happening in certain enclaves. The Kudme, the June Poité, and all of those things in certain enclaves. But can we say it is a St. Lucian culture when it only exists, or mainly it predominantly exists in the cultural or the rural areas, and not and it's entirely generally in St. Lucia as a rule? Can we therefore make the distinction between culture and heritage?
Heritage, of course, is what we inherit from our parents, from our ancestors, all right, and it's also part of culture. In heritage in terms of what they did and what we want to do, and we may not continue doing what they did, but using that what it is as a platform to improve ourselves. An example is the technologies that our forefathers used in the early days for their way of life. An example is the making of farine. Our parents, although it's still being done, but if you look back at what making farine is drudgery. It's a whole day affair. Digging the tubers from the cassava, scraping the skin out of it, washing it, grating it, putting it in bags, put some heavy stones on it, they call it la presse. After this, take out the farine, pass it into a sieve they call lébiché, and dry it into a pot they call platine. Today, there are machines to grate it, remove the skin, grate it, and centrifuge to pull out the moisture out of it, so you don't have to put la presse anymore. And then it's dried in a few seconds. So we can look at the technology and improve upon it. And there's several other areas. People in the early days, they did baskets with bamboo. You can use machines to do this and so on. So it's a way of looking at what was done by our ancestors as a base, and then use technology to improve upon it.
So moving on to fast forwarding a little bit to the Journée Creole festivities. I used to love it. I used to go to the festivities all over St. Lucia, wherever they were, when it was just the one community. And then when it increased to 2 and then 4, I used to try, but eventually I stopped. And the reason for that is, if I did not get to the community in the very early stages, the very early hours, when all the cultural activities were being done, then I missed out on everything, and it became like a big blocker, which I could do without. You know, I could do without it because I'm not into all of that. So I would say maybe I would go to 1, if any at all. What my family has taken to do now is to have our own celebrations at our yards, because we're just not into the throngs of people converging and you're not into that at all. And then you have the babies and they're cranky because they're not used to all of that people, and we're not into that, so we just do our own thing, which is sad in a sense, because like you mentioned earlier, the camaraderie, the community fellowship and all of that, being together and you know, conversing over some libation or food or whatever, you know, that's okay for some people, but not for everybody. Why don't we see now, as moving forward, a lot of people have that complaint, it's, they don't get the cultural aspect, they don't get the dance and the different activities, right, that you just described. When are we going to see activities whereby, like you said, with the farine, and put the previous technology or the foundation technology with the technology that exists today side by side, and say, this is how we have moved, this is our culture, the farine making, not necessarily the way it is being made today, but farine making is a part of our culture, full stop, and this is how we did it 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 100 years ago, and this is how we do it today. And this is the future of it. So you have 3 stages of farine making, for instance. How it was done, how it is done, and how it could be done in the future. When are we going to see that kind of an exhibition at a Journée Creole festivity?
Well, very well. Well, this year we designed exactly what you're talking about this year about Journée Creole. And whereas for the past 33 years we've been having Journée Creole, and let me just give a little history of how it actually began. In 1973, October 20th was declared International Creole Day, the language, Journée Creole International. Now the Folk Research Center embraced that activity by virtue of its mandate in promoting, promulgating culture, the language, and all aspects of culture in St. Lucia. So the first year, in 1973, we were engaged in having discussions in Creole with countries like Martinique, Guadeloupe, Dominica, and so on, who spoke the Creole language. But for the very next year, we thought, well, look, let us use that opportunity to celebrate our culture generally, including all our heritage and so on. And hence the reason we had our first celebration of Journée Creole in Mondrepo. And incidentally, that year, we announced Cécile Descartes as the Queen of Culture. And there we were able to use the opportunity to educate our people about our culture and heritage. So we established exhibitions, so person to see what kind of utensils person used in the past, be it utensils, carpentry tools, utensils that people use for cooking, utensils, bedroom utensils, everything. This is what people now tend to do right now. Whenever there's an exhibition, they look for the oldest stuff to bring forward for people to see. Okay, granted. But we also try to encourage persons to show all the various technologies used by our ancestors, our culture basically. So it's the making of purine, the making of baskets, the making of fish pots, the making of hats, making of mats, and so on. All of these technologies from our people. But somewhere going on the line, while we insisted as an FRC that we should go that way, some persons began to concentrate more on the food and drink aspect, and to a certain extent on the entertainment aspect, and the aspect of educating particularly our children about the way of life of our people in the early days was almost lost. So this year we decided to reconceptualize the whole activity in line with what we originally envisaged. And for that, we have had of course, just last Sunday, not last Sunday, but Sunday before last, the 30th of September, we had the launch of Arts and Creole Heritage Month. But let me just mention quickly that this is being done jointly, the FRC, the Events Company of St. Lucia, and the National Cultural Foundation. We come together to put that package of what is called the Arts and Heritage Month throughout October, which culminates on Journée Creole on the 20th of October. So we said that, look, we began with a launch where we took part as part of a craft festival in Choiseul, used the opportunity. Persons, crafters came around and showed all what they did, the crafts that they do all there. And it's a wide range. As you know, Choiseul is typical for craft, including making open pots and so on, the tesson, the chaudier and so on. Okay, so that was done, and that was well attended. It began with a church service in Creole, very well done, and then we had the formal opening and the craft exhibition. There was also another exhibition on site, and obviously as part of that activity, you must have your Creole food and your Creole drinks and so on. So that went well. The very next day, we had the honoring of Rambo Polio, a violinist par excellence, and that was spearheaded by the Cultural Foundation. Okay, and whereas in the past it's part of what they call the Icon Series, and in the past they have honored people like Virgie Alexander, Charles Cadet, and last year Gabs Santova. It was usually held in the National Cultural Center, but this time they decided to go to Bellevue, where Rambo Polio resides, and transform the school into a kind of amphitheater. And it was a very good, very nice show, honoring one of our icons, Rambo Polio. Now, continuing for the rest of the month, this coming weekend, Sunday, we're having what they call a Wulilaba Ramba. Wulilaba is a local cricket invented by our people, part of our culture again, our heritage. And it was something that our people did on the Sunday. As part of that cricket, they made local bats. They ran not very far, but they had a long whip from side to side. When someone hit the ball, they would never stop. They run up to 100. There's nothing like 6 runs and 4 runs, okay? We're not doing that same thing right now. We have modified it, using better bats today, but the same on the arm kind of way, not bowling over arm, and a softer ball. So we're having that Wulilaba at the Marshall Grounds. We're having about 10 teams throughout the country that will be competing. It's a 10-10, it's not a 20-20, but a 10-10. And the person knocked out until towards the end, the team that prevails, of course, is the winner. But as part of that Wulilaba Ramba, we're having entertainment, okay, by groups like Secret Band, or what they call Sigwe Band, and there'll be vending of Creole food, and I stress Creole food.
Okay, what's the difference between Creole food and what we eat normally every day?
Okay, Creole food, what we crew ourselves, the preparations that we did in the past, and the wide range of Creole foods, from the famous bouillon to breadfruit and saltfish, breadfruit and harsaw, okay, or herring. All right, there is
now let's stop here for a minute. I've often wondered why our national dish is green figure and saltfish. We don't produce saltfish in St. Lucia.
Yes, you can. Yes.
I didn't say we
You
couldn't,
you
but
can.
we don't produce saltfish in St. Lucia. I don't know. I've never seen herring caught and brought to shore on any of our fishing vessels. But these are the things that are national dishes and Creole dishes, and we embrace. And the salt content of these delicacies is so high, and we do know that we are a people that are predisposed to high blood pressure. But we keep embracing that kind of, Creole food.
Well, I'll tell you what, while you're right that the salt content is very high, our people in the early days, that's what they ate. They had no refrigerator. The way they were able to preserve most of their meats is to put salt into it. So apart from the saltfish which came from overseas, and there's a cod, the real saltfish from Canada, they salted the meat whenever they had, it's Christmas time, they salted an animal, they ate the fresh for Christmas Day, and by next day they salt it, and it goes on for about 6 months. They bought salt beef, and as I said, it's a way of preserving. The only way of preserving it was by salting it, because we had no refrigerator. However, those persons, they worked, they perspire, and in so doing, they were not predisposed to what you talk about, high blood pressure and so on. And what is very clear about their way of life was that they didn't eat any processed foods. It was purely foods out of our ground. Basically no fertilizers. All right, which adds to the problem of processed foods and so on. Okay, so while it's true that the salt content was very high, but because by nature of the continuous exercise, working hard, walking continuously, they were not affected by high blood pressure and diabetes and so on. Today, persons hardly exercise. They eat, drive all days to get home, watch television, while watching television, eat. And they have developed a culture of eating continuously, overeating. Hence the reason why some people, they get obese. I can tell you. Anytime you go out to any party, the first thing people do is to buy food to eat. After having lunch home, they get out and everybody's into eating. Every meeting you go to, they has to have food. That was a part about the way of our life years ago.
But this is our culture now.
But it's our culture, right?
So how do we take the better part of our culture from yesteryear and juxtapose it against what our culture is now, and to take the better part of that and incorporate it in our culture today?
I think it's a question of discipline. Okay, we knew very well, for example, we had 3 meals for the day. There's breakfast, lunch and dinner. And the dinner wasn't very heavy. In some instances, it wasn't a very heavy dinner, very mealy. It was just bread and some tea. All right, the heaviest meal was at lunch. But today, most persons' dinner is heavy. I recall as a boy having this, tea. Our people was not well. It was well off, and you hardly see butter. It was, like something foreign. And I used to say, when I get bigger, I will buy steak and eat the stuff, And today you eat steak, you're in trouble because you're not putting into red meat into your system. All right. So the way of life in those days was better for you. It looked very, very poor, but it was the right way of eating. Okay.
Right. So back to the Jeune Creole festivities. Again, I still haven't heard what I asked earlier about.
Well, I was coming to it. I was coming to it.
So let's move on to that.
So we're moving on to the various activities during the month. So we had the lunch. We had this the Rambo-Napoleon, the Onion Napoleon. The next activity was the Ulila I mentioned this coming Sunday in Marsha. And after that, we have another activity up in Patience, where we'll be happy. We call it a violin and lawas and music festival. But we're using the opportunity to launch a folk museum in the name of Cécile Descartes, where she lived at a house. During her life, before she actually passed on, the government of the day provided her with home, and people like Lime at the time, Wasco, Lusilek provided free electricity. And the idea was, after she died, we turned the house into a museum. So this time we're about to do that, and we are launching that museum come the 21st, the Sunday the 21st in Patience. And as part of that celebration, there will be music, there will be, again, beverages, food, Creole food, and so on. All right? Then the next activity would be At the National Cultural Center, where we have our yearly Lawen Creole show. 6 ladies will be vying for that on the night of the 20th, which is a Saturday. Okay. And then we go to the big show we call the Grand Fete. This time around, we wanted to have it only one place, the Journée Creole, in VA4. Now, the reason for VA4 is because this place is huge. You can take, there's a lot of space out there. All right. And for what we intend to do this time around, we are collaborating with agencies like the Ministry of Agriculture, the Department of Fisheries, the Department of Forestry, SEDU, the A&H, that's the Archaeological and Historical Society, and the National Trust. They all will be there, showing what they do, you know, and again, it's a way of educating our people about our heritage and culture. All right. And there will be, of course, the vending of foods and so on, and there'll be entertainment. But as you rightly mentioned, this time around will be something for difference. You would see all those things, the farine, how it is made, what can be done to improve upon it, and so on. So all of these things will be there, and there'll be an exhibition in the town hall in VA4. Okay, so there it would be one big activity, ready for entertainment as well as using the opportunity to educate yourself about our heritage and culture.
Right. So,
but along also there'll be also activity in Soufrière. So we're basically having Journée Creole in 2 places. The main place is in VA4, and the other place is in Soufrière.
Why the breakdown? Because we originally said one place,
yes,
and now
originally we wanted to have one place, and in fact we had an activity for Soufrière where we wanted persons, and in fact, let me also mention that the theme for this year's Creole Heritage Month is Découvrir St. Lucie, Découvrir Call. Discover St. Lucia, discover yourself. We were saying that persons need to go around St. Lucia. There are lots of heritage sites in St. Lucia that many St. Lucians don't know. There are strangers coming and tourists coming, and they know about Tet Paul, they know about the Sulphur Springs, they know about Jerusalem, but our people don't know. So we are asking persons to go out and explore our country, know their country, know themselves. Okay, that is the theme. Again, I was saying that we have having an activity for Soufrière in the Sulphur Springs to encourage persons to go to Sulphur Springs, have a sulphur bath. But so the Soufrière people opted to have Journée Creole on the 20th, and this is why we have Journée Creole there, in addition to what's in VA4.
Right, so we're having it 2 days. Do you think having
Not 2 days, 2 places.
Sorry, 2 places.
Yeah.
Do you think that will dilute what you're trying to do in Vieux Fort?
I don't think so, because there are lots of the various agencies will
there be a continuous recycling of what's happening throughout the day? Because I know some people, they're not going to be satisfied with just going to Vieux Fort or just going to Soufrière. They will want to take in both places, because I know there are people who look forward to Journée Creole every year, and they go to all 4 places.
Yes, well, we're aware of that very well. And in addition,
those persons, hold on, before we continue, those persons would have gone to Soufrière in the morning and then head down to Vieux Fort in the afternoon and vice versa. Would they get the same things that the persons who were there from morning, the same experience?
In Vieux Fort, yes. In Soufrière, it may not be so. But in Vieux Fort, yes, just get the entire experience for the entire day. All right. Okay. And that's the difference we have for this year. And this time is being hosted by the Folk Research Center, the Cultural Development Foundation, as well as the events company of St. Lucia.
What else can we expect during the celebrations this month?
Well, I've mentioned all the activities, but we know very well that, as you rightly said, persons do their own thing. In addition to the areas that we have on Journée Creole, persons will be doing there. People will be around the country having their own activity. We know that in the past, people are still saying, why don't you all allow everybody to do their own thing? When it's Christmas time, nobody say when it's Christmas, everybody do Christmas. But this is a different situation. You're talking about mass crowd events. And once you're talking mass crowd events, you must get permission and follow the mass crowd event protocol established by NEMO and the police. So you have to apply to NEMO. And as part of a mass crowd event activity, you need to have police, traffic management, solid waste management. You need to also have doctors and nurses, an ambulance on site. And these things are important, and as well as public liability insurance. Okay? So in the event something happens, you know that you can find some way of assisting. But if everybody does their own thing, obviously you have chaos about the place. If something happens, and the other aspect of it too that's becoming more important is the aspect of serving wholesome foods.
I was coming to that. Because when you have these kinds of activities, there are lots of people who complain the following day or later on that they've gotten food poisoning. Every year there are always these kinds of complaints. What is being done to mitigate against that kind of thing? Because you would find people who prepare something from the night before the foods, and then come the following day to serve that food. They probably just warm it up, just to put it on a cold pot, just for show, that kind of thing. They don't keep it at the temperature.
Very well.
Are we going to have staff from the Ministry of Health continuously going around the various booths to ensure that the standard is met?
You're quite right. The staff members of the Environmental Health Division of the Ministry of Health are the persons who go out there, and they do rounds regularly to ensure that persons, as you rightly said, cold foods are served cold all the time, warm foods are served warm all the time, okay? And ensuring that you don't mix, for example, chopping pork on shrimp, because some persons are allergic to shrimp or lobster, and you serve them with this and you can cause them problems. And ensuring, as I said, that all the food is served as properly cooked and so on. Ensure that it is done properly, that the people are properly dressed, that everybody has a food license, they have a health card, and not only the owners of the bar, but everybody serving must have, the food a health card. All right, the hair must be covered if it's the ladies, no earrings, and so on, to ensure that it is done properly of the highest standard.
Let's go back to we're due for a break, but before we go on break, let's talk a little bit about the Lawen Kweyol. Actually, let's go for a break, and when we come back, we'll go back to the Lawen Kweyol. We'll talk a little bit about that, where it's being held, how much it is, who are the ladies competing, what communities they're from.
Okay.
We're due for a break. When we come back, more on Journée Kweyol festivities. Welcome back, and thank you for staying tuned to what's happening now with Laura, where we make your stories, our stories, and we're talking culture. Before we went off on break, we talked about the Lawen Kweyol activity, which is coming up, and you promised to tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, sure. The Lawen Kweyol show has been happening for the past 15 years now, and it's one of the premier shows during Creole Heritage Month. It is a show for difference. First of all, the age group is 15 above.
Why?
They have persons.
Why are we being so? Why are we segregating? Why are we being so selective?
There's also a show for youngsters. They call it the Jeunesse Kweyol. Although we don't have it this year, but we normally have Jeunesse Kweyol.
Why is it happening this year?
This year, in fact, I should have mentioned there is a kind of show for primary schools that's happening at the National Cultural Center, and it encompasses a number of activities, including parades, dances, and so on. All right, that's being done in conjunction with the Ministry of Education. So the Lawen Kweyol is 15 above, and one of the reasons is because we want persons to teach, and it's a way of teaching people about our culture and heritage. So each of the contestants would display some technology, some Creole technology. It's not done the very night, but what we do is that it's done during the month, and somebody videos the activity, and they play it on the evening, on the night of the show, and the contestant explains what's happening. For example, if it's making bread, making femi, making tablet, making hearts, making a wop duet, all these technologies, Creole technologies. In addition, they also discuss their community, something about the community, what is peculiar about the community. And let me also mention that before I go to that area, that there are 6 ladies involved. There's a lady from Choiseul, one from Monrepo, 2 from Castries, one from Grosile. Okay, so they each represent their constituency, and they all talk about what's happening out there. There's also a skit that they do, a Creole skit, some very interesting sometimes. Sometimes about the river washing. Sometimes it's about how the people operated long ago, how they did various games. There are lots of ring games that we played years ago, which is all gone. So they teach all of this. So apart from it being a competition, it's also a way of teaching people about our heritage and culture. And that will be held on the 20th of October. The price is $50 per ticket. And we'll start advertising probably about 2 weeks before the show. All right. And it's usually a very nice show. People look forward to it. Okay. And as I said, it's been done well over 15 years right now. And a number, in fact, last year we had the Queen of Queens. We had 6 queens that came
Who
out
won
there.
that?
Yeah, it was won by a lady from Jackmill. Her name was Simon, was her first name again. I can't remember her first name, but she's a Simon, a school teacher. Okay. And very interesting. And I said very informative. In addition, we have side shows, other groups come out, cultural groups come around and, fill in as part of that show.
One of the things I've realized, or the dearths for me, in all of this, I don't hear, although you did mention that there is going to be something in the Culture Center for school kids. But I remember when I was growing up as a secondary school student, we used to have this quadrille competition that all the schools, and I know, on my way to the studio, I was listening to the news and I was hearing this particular teacher talking about getting rid of ranking in schools. When you write exams, that first, second, third thing, that, it fosters competition among students. And I was a little perturbed by that because I happen to think that competition could be healthy. It is when the teachers sometimes are the very ones perpetuating this cutthroat, you have to do, and some schools are notorious for that because I've seen it myself. They're notorious. They single out certain students because they know that they have certain potential and they really push them, and these kids get so nervous and they get so, they're anxiety ridden.
Very true.
And I don't think that's what the ranking system was meant. I think it was meant to foster healthy competition. And I don't think that healthy competition is a bad thing. We used to have all these little kinds of competitions. And I remember as a secondary school student, we used to have those quadrille competitions. And I used to participate in every single one of them, the 5 years that I was at secondary school. And I remember my 3rd year, I was confirming on the very same day of the finals, and my school had made it to the finals, and I looked forward to that every year. And I made a promise to my mom. I negotiated. I tried all my best to tell her that I would do another year of confirmation lessons, just to be allowed to participate in that year's competition. And I would confirm the following year. Well, my parents were not having any of that, so I missed the finals that year. And I like to say that we didn't win because I wasn't there. But I don't hear this happening anymore. I don't hear about the competitions, the quadrille competitions that fostered that sense of pride and that sense of inclusion in young people in the culture.
You're right. And while it was done, it was actually being done by the Ministry of Education, the teachers, of course, and it's something that we can try to re-establish. I think it's something that we
I think it's something that is missing, because I always looked forward to certain schools, the costumes that they came up with. You always try to outdo this other school. Every school had their rival, and it didn't always have to be the top school was your rival. You knew that perhaps you were not at that level yet where you would probably win the competition. Every school knew where they were at, so they had these schools that they used to pit themselves against. So my school always used to look at Soufrière. So I went to Vivat Comprehensive, and Soufrière was our main competition, our main rival. And so we always looked at Soufrière. We never looked at Convent, because Convent only had girls, and Convent had the girls dressing as boys. And we always thought that anytime Convent placed, it was a farce. Because,
exactly.
It didn't matter whether they placed or not. They didn't belong there because they only had girls. And there was this friendly rivalry, and I don't hear that anymore. That's one of the things that I would like to see. There's a resurgence of because I don't hear in all of the things. I have the list there. I don't see well, there's a schools Creole festival.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that. Maybe
Well, this one
if
is-
we can tell the
Well, this one is being organized mainly by the CAMDU division of the Ministry of Education, headed by Jason Bachelor Joseph, and we're just providing some support basically. But they're spearheading it.
I wish Jason would have been here because it's only $1 for
yes.
the entrance fee.
Yeah, only $1.
And I would love to hear more about it because
Okay.
I've never heard until you said it.
Yeah.
Well, I have the list there.
Yeah,
But I would have loved for us to hear more about it. The lines are now open, and the number to call is 4519788, or you can send us your WhatsApp messages at 284-6536. You can send us your emails at laurajapier@gmail.com. Again, the number to call is 4519788. WhatsApp on 284-6536, and email us at laurajapier@gmail.com. Yes.
I also want to mention that, first of all, that Creole Heritage Month by Junior Creole is now the biggest cultural festival in St. Lucia, embraced by most St. Lucians.
We have a call. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Hello, good evening, Laura.
Good evening.
Interesting program. I like listening to the gentleman. But year in, year out, I keep on saying the same thing, and I'm not seeing a difference. And I hope maybe next year there will be a difference. It seems as if Junior Creole is about food, dance, art. And our culture should be a holistic thing, where it includes our values. I'm not hearing about that. Solutions at values. One of which was our country used to be considered one of the cleanest. Is it now? When you look around you, everywhere has, they cut the grass, but when you look into the grass, the garbage, the place is dirty. Really, look around and look and see if that's the St. Lucia we used to have before, and if that's the St. Lucia we would continue to have. I think we should add to the whole aspect of the Junior Creole, the values, the discipline that we used to have before, of being clean, of having good courtesy. Today we do things anyhow, anyway, and we look at it and we say, no, these days good manners, you seldom get that.
How do you propose that we instill values and that we ensure that our people greet each other and that kind of thing?
Okay, very good. The gentleman is speaking about going to the different schools. I think going into the different schools will assist a lot. We were talking about hypertension, and we were talking about the fact that St. Lucia has a problem of diabetes and obesity and everything. Now that they've gone into the schools, the children are more aware of it. And the kids will ask you, how much sugar is in that drink? These days, they are very aware of it. Yes, you still find children who would drink out of the way, but the children nowadays are very cognizant of what they are drinking because it is coming to them. They are bombarding them with, that information. And so that same thing can be done in the schools. The values that we used to have, the cleanliness, the courtesies. I mean, now you're coming out of an elevator and people just rushing in. No courtesy. When you reach you open a door. Thank you. These are the things that St. Lucia used to have before. That's part of our culture too,
Yes, it's part of our culture. I quite agree with you. But I'm trying to see how we put it in a Junior Creole setting of culture, because at the end of the day, these are things that we have to take responsibility for ourselves. Yes. So whilst the organizers of Junior Creole festivities and during the month of October are focused on the activities that they're focused on, this is supposed to be activities and this is supposed to be things throughout the year, every day that we do for ourselves, because we value that and we raise our children that way. So I don't think that, whilst I agree with you, I see your point, where we have a dearth, where these activities are, these courtesies and these norms are concerned. But shouldn't that be every St. Lucian's responsibility to ensure that they say good morning, good afternoon, thank you, please, no thanks, and to raise their children that way? Because if you raise your kids that way, and everybody raises their kids that way, then you have a society. But I know adults who we say go to the schools, but I think we should go to the homes, because there are adults who don't greet each other. And so the children, even if you go to the schools, and the children, you say good morning, good afternoon, da 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 da. When they get into the homes, the parents just walk in. They don't even greet their children.
Laura,
how do we expect
you are
the children
on the television right now, and if we use the television, it can work. We use the television, it can work. But you talk about the schools. Okay, let's not keep to the schools, because then we're not dealing with parents. But if we use the television does a good work. Use the television, and if the children are not getting it in the homes, when they get it on the television, look, Daddy, look at what the lady is saying. You should greet me first too. It's not only me greeting you, but you can greet me too. You understand? And it's to me, the St. Lucia that we had before was not only eating and drinking. It was also a person who had those values. And this is why we were called a clean country, because everywhere was clean. But now, everywhere, look at the grass all over the place. Everybody believes it's government that's supposed to clean place for them.
Of course,
but
because
si
you're perfect, you're by
Yes, you understand? So Laura, the same way he's on the program talking about what they can be doing, do the same thing on the television. Bring back the courtesies, and maybe the children will see it, because they're not getting it in the home, but they might see it on television. The television works.
But the school,
Laura?
Right. Thank you so much for your thank you so much for your contribution. You were saying, Mr.
Yeah,
Foss.
but the school is the right place for doing this. When I was a school kid, we're not only concerned about academics, but we're concerned about discipline. That was a key area. The aspects of greeting people, that was one of, we did what they call civics with the Damba.
We have another call. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Good, thank you. Good night to everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Excellent program.
Thank you.
Laura is very lucky that she has another student of mine doing very, very well.
Right.
You've given me some very great explanation.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to tease you, and thought that you probably might have concentrated on the first cultural activity of man.
I know where you're coming from.
And you're talking about the food and so on.
Right.
And it comes from agriculture.
Culture, yes, agriculture.
That is the first culture of man.
Very true.
Right? And I thought that you probably would have dealt a little bit more of that because of your background.
Yes, actually.
However, you did touch on it.
Yes, with the Ministry of Agriculture down
And you could use it as an example of what you're talking about. The changes, the dynamism of the dynamic nature of culture generally. And a very good example of that is that the culture changes because of technology.
Very well.
Is the technological forces that do, and a perfect example, of course, is agriculture that started from the first culture of man, so to speak.
Yes.
I just thought I would do that. The second point is the question Laura rose about the national dish, saltfish, green fig and saltfish. Now there's a reason for the saltfish, and it goes right back. You have to trace it back to slavery in terms of the availability of protein, protein element to feeding a vast number of slaves, and it's a throwback really. From slave conditions. I don't want to go into the details of that. The other thing that I wanted to touch about, I like the introduction of the diversity of the Creole Day. Like she talked about the quadrille and so on, which I think is, you know, instead of just having just food and all that kind of thing on the day, there are a lot of other cultural aspects which we have to be introduced.
Very well.
And one of them, I think, is the question of handicraft, and I want to deal with that, and Laura liked that one. The handicraft has a lot of potential in terms of souvenirs for tourists. And I think we need to bring that back.
Yes.
Now, I have a personal love for that because my aunt was very good at handicraft. And she taught the girls at the Labrie Girls' School. And the Labrie Girls' School became the best handicraft people in the country. And this is being lost. And I think it should be reintroduced. And probably Laura has some influence in Labrie, so she might be able to get it reintroduced.
Very well.
The other thing that I want you all touched about, but that one, of course, Laura will disagree with me. And that is, there's still value in corporal punishment. And I think the point that you are making, LaForce, in terms of the stability of the youth, or rather the instability that is currently expressing itself, may very well be due to the fact that you have total elimination of corporal punishment. That is something which I think we need to have a great conversation.
I will have to invite you across to sit on my chair so that we can have this conversation, because you are quite right. I will not support corporal punishment in any way, shape or form. I have seen people start off with a punishment, you know, you don't listen, and it becomes a full out abusive onslaught. And for that reason, just because of the potential of that, I will not condone corporal punishment in any form.
I know that you will. That's why I said so. I'm just teasing you. So I know that you would never want to. But what I'm saying, that LaForce had a point in terms of the stability of the youth. And if other things are not working, you need to go back at least partially to what used to work. And that is the point that I'm making. But I know you'll never agree to that, Laura. I know that.
Yeah. But thank you so much, as usual, for your contributions. You know, I always look forward to your contributions to the show. But I will keep up to that promise. This is the second time or third time that I'm issuing that, and I think it's high time I issue that formal invitation to have you on my couch.
I'm out of that. You have my students. They can perform. My students like...
Sometimes you need the masters.
My students... No. My students are just as good or better than me. So
sometimes you need the full 90 minutes of the master. But we'll talk about that. Thank you again for calling.
Very well. I wanted to mention that that clip was, there is a World Food Day being organized by the Ministry of Agriculture. Of course, they're the ones who do this. And this time it's being held in Fordor. So it's part of our calendar.
When is this?
And that is the 14th, this coming Sunday.
Yes,
up in Fordor. And that is a very good thing. We talk about food, so it's important. And this time around, they'll be concentrating on processing of foods. All right?
So there'll be more eats and drinks.
There'll be eats and drinks and so on.
Right. We have another call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Yeah, good night, Miss Laura.
Good night.
I agree with some things you say, but not all.
Talk to me.
All right. I don't believe in abuse. What we saw tonight on the video, that was abuse. But we're talking about correction. And the big man upstairs, I sure you believe in God. And the Lord says, spare the rod and spoil the child. That means there is correction in the rod. If you have a child, and the child is doing something bad, and you tell the child to stop once, twice, the second time, the third time, and the fourth time, and you take a belt and you give the child 2 lashes on the backside or on the hand, that is to correct the child. And the Lord is supporting that. And if the Lord is supporting that, I myself supporting it. And you should support it because
No. I will not support that.
No, but you don't know. You don't know more than the Lord. You are not wiser than God.
No.
God said, "Spare the rod and spoil the child." And if you spare the rod, you will spoil the child.
No, I don't believe in that.
Well,
because I believe that before you could say what you want, before you get to that point,
well, you don't live in God. That's
you could
God
say
says,
what you want. So I believe before you get to that point of corporal punishment, there's so much that can be done. But we are a lazy bunch of people. We want the children, and I've heard so many people say that, do as I say, but not as I do. We want to exhibit all the worst behaviors in the world. We want to cheat, we want to lie, we want to steal, we want to curse, we want to exhibit all these deviant behaviors in front of our children. And when our children do as we do, we want to kill them. Not do it wow, not for vomison. All these kinds of nonsense has got to stop. We have to start leading by example before we pick up the rod.
Abusing.
Well, that is where it comes from. That is where it starts. Because before we want to discipline our children, before we want to correct them, before we want to say, Laura, don't do this because so, we just want to raise our hand and not at all, sir.
You don't give me a chance to explain.
No. I gave you a chance to speak. But when you will tell me, I don't believe in God because I don't believe in abusing my child, then something is wrong with you.
Is God who said spare the rod and spoil the child?
Thank you very much, sir. But you could say what you want. That is it. We're not having that conversation. I do not believe in, and this is what I'm talking about, Mr. LaForce. We want to curse in front of our children. We want to have multiple partners in front of our children and teach them to lie for us. Don't tell mommy I was with Miss Martha. You know you're married to the child's mother. You take the child as a passport as an excuse to go out there. You go in and do all your liaison with Miss Martha. And you're telling the child, don't tell mommy I was with Miss Martha. Tell mommy I brought you from ice cream. We're teaching them to lie. Then when the child goes to school and the child does not come home at 5 o'clock as they're supposed to, when they come at 6 o'clock and say where you come from and they start to lie, you're ready to kill them. You're ready to, the wrath of God is on that child. Because that child is exhibiting what you have taught that child to do. So before you come and tell me I don't believe in God and tell me about sparing the rod and spoiling the child, how about you raise your child correctly so that your child has respect, that child is principled, that child is raised in the right way. You know, a lot of the child, the best thing they could have ever done was to remove corporal punishment from. I have seen children abused at school by teachers, you know, because a child got something wrong. My own niece one day peed her pants, you know, in grade 4. Peed her pants. Why? Because she was afraid that the teacher was going to beat her. And the child knew her times table in and out, you know, but just the fact that the teacher will say, if any of you cannot recite your times table, you are getting beat today. The child peed her pants. While saying the times table correctly, she's peeing on her. Because she don't get licks at home. Because the way we raise our children is we say to them, you don't do this. Don't do this because. Don't do this because. And we give them the reasons why. So when you do the thing that we don't pick up a belt. The first thing we do, pick up a belt and beat the child. There are other ways. So you get punished. You're on a timeout. You lose your telephone. You lose privileges. But the first thing we do is not to pick up a rod to beat the child. And we're so upset because that child defied us. We're going on and on and on and on. The child's skin lupe, you know, blood spewing all over the place. The child dragging the child over because we cannot contain our anger. If this is the way we are going to behave, I believe cut it out completely. Let us not put temptation in our way. Let us raise our children correctly. So don't tell me I don't believe in God because I don't believe in corporal punishment. You are out of order, sir. I will not stand by that lightly. You are out of order. And don't tell me about God says spoil the rod, spare the rod and spoil the child. God also tell us do not fornicate. He also told us thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill. We doing all of that, but we want the little child that whose mental faculties is not as developed as ours to understand what we ourselves refuse to understand. That makes sense to you? That doesn't make sense. So no, we are not beating any child. We are not beating any child to spare anybody. No, nothing like that. We are going to raise our children properly. We are going to... I remember one time my niece was about 2 or 3 years old. My first niece was about 3 years old, and she came to me. She was very upset. Auntie, I'm so angry. I said, Didi, why are you so angry? Mommy made me angry, and I put her to sit on my lap. And I said to her, tell me why mommy made you angry. And we had a conversation. And by the end of the conversation, she says, okay, auntie, I understand. And she went up to apologize to her mom for having that burst of anger. And my own mother was in the kitchen with me, and she said, sit him, and she could not understand how I put the child to sit down on me and to explain. She could not believe it because tell me ujani anger. I said, mommy, no, this is not how. I mean, you raised us with according to what you had, the skills that you learned, how you were raised. But we don't have to always perpetuate the things that, you know, we know now for a fact. It does not work. We know, and they tell you that you know, and we know that. And she said, you know what, that is so true. And she understood where I was coming from. Because if I just take my tap, that child does not understand anger. She just knows to suppress the anger. And when she's out there with her friends, to unleash that anger on her friends, because this is what the adults in her life, this is what she sees the adults in her life are doing. So we have to learn ways to raise our children without raising our hand. You know, the first thing we do is not to raise our hand. That's a last resort, a very, 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 very last resort. That is the resort that comes after last. It's not the first resort, and a lot of us resort to it as first. But we digress, and we are moving away from the culture theme, and we are all out of time. Final words.
Okay. I started by saying that this is one of the biggest cultural events in St. Lucia, Creole Heritage Month for Junior Creole. Bigger than Carnival. Some people argue that Carnival is big, but as you know, Carnival, there's certain persons who don't believe in Carnival, certain religious people. But Creole Heritage Month, Junior Creole goes across religions. Everybody's involved.
Because we like food and eat.
Not only that.
It's true, because it's a big part of it, it's a huge chunk of it, yeah.
Yes, the diaspora. People in New York, people in Connecticut, in Georgia, they call us, tell us, could we be a host community? We say, sure, and you're right up where you are. So St. Lucians all over the world get involved in celebrating with us. And one of the biggest days too, I don't know if you observed this, what they call Vendredi Creole. All schools are all well dressed up in the madras.
Now, this is one of the things that I wanted us to touch on just a little bit. I'm begging for 2 minutes. The madras, we say, okay, the madras is a cultural, that's the
cultural wear,
the Creole wear. And if I take something else, like a more leaning towards African print or something else, more maybe Saguano or whatever like that, they'll tell me, oh no, that's not cultural, it's the madras. Briefly, very, very briefly, tell us about the madras and how that became cultural wear.
Okay, it so happened that in the very early days, our people loved the madras wear. And madras is not only from Madras in India. Okay, the Africans use madras also, and also in the UK, the Scots, they use madras. They have the Scots. Okay, so but we in St. Lucia adopted it very, very early in the game. You know, people use the madras wear, and hence the reason why it's now basically our cultural wear. But flowers, because the persons will argue with you that the wop duet was actually made out of flowers. Actually made out of flowers. So we have the flowers too, as well as the madras. But as we say, culture is dynamic. We're now going to the madras, and so we accept it as part of our cultural wear.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay. Yes, and so this is where we end our this episode for tonight. I hope it has been educational for you. I hope you have learned a little bit more than you knew last year. I hope it was engaging for you, and we hope to have one more before the season is over. Can't confirm for now, but we will let you know. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been What's Happening Now with Laura, where we make your story our story. See you next week.
You